Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel, Infinite Wish. I am Infinite Wish. So today I'm going to be talking about Saturn in the third house, but I'm going to be doing the dark side of having Saturn in the third house. So Saturn is karma. Saturn rules time. If you guys are aware, even, they say that this matrix is ruled and created by Saturn. Also, there's also an eye that sits right on top of Saturn. So there's a lot of conspiracy when it comes to Saturn. And, it's so interesting because people always say that Saturn is the original sun. And that's when the sky used to be purple. So there, like, a lot of things go back to Saturn. And Saturn isn't known for things positive like that. Like, um, you know, if you even look at Saturn's history over time, like, there were even events that were ruled by Saturn. Saturday is also known to be Saturn's day. And then Sunday is Sunday. And then what do we usually do? So, like, on Saturday, that's when everybody kind of, indulges because it's the weekend. For the most part, everybody's off on weekends. And then Sundays is when people go and worship. And so, Saturn's not really associated with a lot of good things, because people always say Saturn's like a reflection of how evil the world can be, suffering. So that's about Saturn. So our third house represents um, short distance travel, transportation, neighbors, siblings, community. And then, the third house is also early learning, where your ego develops. So the third house is really important because it's like a foundation that you get, and it tells you what the world's about, and you connect it with everything else in your chart, of course. But the third house is really the foundation of your early learning. So when Saturn is sitting in a third house, it does cast a shadow and restricts and gives you delays, and wherever it's placed. So these people could have grown up following the rules, asking a lot of questions, because they need to know the consequence of something. They want that to be communicated in a very clear and direct way. But since Saturn is sitting in the third house, there's going to be some blockage and delays when it comes to that. So these people could have asked a lot of questions, and, the people around them may have not wanted to communicate that and maybe thought that, this person's asking a lot of questions, and they might just tell them, like, hey, stop asking a lot of questions. And these people, when things like this are communicated to them, they can take it so literally, especially growing up, early development. Okay, this is what we're talking about. So these people can take it really literally and be scared to ask questions or give an answer or voice their opinion. So their voice can be taken in that kind of way, because these people are so curious with the mind. How does this work? Like, wait, why is this way? So people, parents, authority figures could be really annoyed by this and just outright say, hey, stop asking questions, like, enough. And that just triggers their like confidence. So they could have, now they just don't have the confidence to speak up and ask questions and have an opinion about something. And, the third house also represents belonging. So these people may feel like they don't really belong, or if they're trying to belong, you know, they really struggle belonging and fitting in. And because of that, too, these people could be, you can get bullied, um, and because of, the way things were communicated to them, they may not have really the self confidence to speak up or, go tell an adult. Or if they do tell an adult, like these are the people who put up with bullying and put up with things. And the minute they're trying to speak up, it's like it's so late. Like, how long has this been going on for? And, you know, the people around them, their parents probably thought that everything was fine because, they're very quiet. So also there could be a communication block with parents as well. Like, not very asking, oh, how was school? It could be very surface level, and maybe, you know, because of this one incident, so, this person with a Saturn in third house, they're very scared to say anything. They don't want to get in trouble because they got a really bad reaction last time. So these people can kind of hold in their communication. So, because the third house is also ruled by Mercury, so with Saturn being here, you could have grown up something with the mouth. Either you could have had braces, retainers. You could have, speech issues. Maybe, English isn't your first language, and grew up learning one language, and then as you went to school, you had to transition and learn English. So you can have you could be insecure with how you speak because of that. And you could have taken discipline literally because you want the crime, like literal, like, the thing that you did that was wrong. Okay, you won't do it again, but because, we want to make sure you won't do it again, this is the consequence for that action. So these people kind of need that directness and communication, but with Saturn sitting here, these people might have not gotten that. Everything's very blurred, so you can get in trouble and you can be disciplined, but it's not very clear of how long you're going to be disciplined for, how long you can't go hang out with your friends. So that could be kind of the issue that Saturn and the third house people have when it comes to getting disciplined. They kind of need that direct communication because they need it to make sense. So what you're communicating to me is because of that action I communicated, and this is the consequence. And, now I've learned not to kind of do that again. These people may have not gotten the one-on-one time that they probably needed in the classroom. These people could have had learning disabilities, or, they could be very intellectual in certain subjects, but for some reason those went unnoticed. They weren't, I guess, no one kind of really supported them and said, hey, like, you're actually really good at this. So, their talents could have just went unrecognized, or even if, parents, teachers knew that they were, smart in that in different subjects, it wasn't really focused on. Like, the things that were focused on the most were the things that they weren't doing the greatest in. So now you have these individuals that can't recognize their own talents, especially when it's early learning. They can't recognize it. So these people can grow up and have trouble in school, not knowing what career to take, because also they could be interested in one thing, but parents and teachers could be guiding them to go somewhere else. Especially parents, they may not want the Saturn the third house person to do this because they want them to do this. So because it's going to affect the mind. So this is going to really affect someone with the Saturn in third house. They can't make up their mind. They don't know what career path to take. School can be such a delay. They're really, really trying hard in school. Yeah. And on the other side of this, they, people around them could be kind of demanding them to be kind of perfect. So it could be really black and white, because on the other hand, they may not be getting the support they need, but here on the other side, parents are expecting them to be absolutely perfect. And if sometimes people with Saturn in the third house, they may not even feel like they are good enough in that kind of way. So that's another way that this can play out. And the dark side about having Saturn in the third house is, parents, teachers, they know that this individual is struggling, but sometimes these people just don't really get the help they need. Sometimes it's put back on them, like their mind is somewhere else, like they don't want to be exactly where they are. So there's just a lot of things that can happen when Saturn's in the third house. And because Saturn, the third house represents siblings, so, these people could easily be the ones that are watching their sibling. Everything's about their sibling. Their identity is enmeshed into their sibling. So basically, the dark side of having Saturn in the third house with siblings, you may not really, you could get along with your sibling, but there's just this blockage that's placed, from the parents, authority figures. So, they could have communicated negatively about the Saturn in the third house person. So therefore the sibling, acts accordingly, communicates accordingly. There might be disrespect, um, with the siblings because of what was communicated either in private to the sibling. So, yeah. And, Saturn in the third house, you could have skipped a grade for whatever reason, held back a grade. Maybe you went to school in foreign lands, for just a little bit, and then you return back. So, and third house, I say, represents gossip too. So, there could be gossip, with the Saturn, the third house person. And these people have a problem being understood, because Saturn is blockage. So there is a blockage in communication. They just feel like they're just not really being really understood, or they may be communicating, in a way that others aren't really receptive to. Okay, let's get into part 2 of Saturn in the third house.